In 2023, I decided to rent a cabin for a few months due to a difficult time with my father, which made me need a place to get away. The previous owner of the property had personal issues and had to leave the place. I'll call him the owner for the sake of simplicity. The cabin was exclusively for me, and I was in charge of the monthly rent, which was ideal for my temporary and complicated situation. The cabin had 2 floors. On the ground floor, a compact kitchen and a reasonable-sized living room, and on the upper floor, a bedroom that required climbing a narrow staircase. The bedroom was accessed by one of those hatch-like doors, which gave the cabin a certain charm, but also took a bit of work to open. I had been living there for a month now, and since I had already paid the second month's rent, I felt pretty settled in the place. The cabin was at the end of a small dirt road, surrounded by other similar houses. One of them was unoccupied. I never saw a car parked or a light on there. The other houses were occupied, but even though they lived there, I never had any contact with the neighbors. Since I worked 12-hour shifts, I was exhausted when I got home, so my routine was basically to get home, fall into bed, and watch TV until I fell asleep. One of those nights, I got home, made myself some bread with peanut butter and jelly, and had a protein shake for dinner. Then I went straight to bed. I always made sure to close the downstairs door before going to sleep, because I felt uncomfortable having the bedroom door open during the night. It felt exposed, vulnerable, even though the door didn't have a lock. The cabin was built for one person or a couple, so the space was very compact. I was lying in bed watching TV when suddenly I heard a voice coming from downstairs. "Who's there?" My heart jumped and I jumped up quickly. The voice seemed to be coming from inside the house, but it could have been outside. I turned off the TV and went to the round window above the bed, trying to see what was going on. The darkness outside didn't allow me to see anything, and I didn't see anyone. I decided to answer, so I said, "Who's there?" The silence that followed was even more frightening. I got out of bed, went to the door handle and opened it, looking at the stairs. I even called out for my father, imagining that maybe he had shown up there, but I got no answer. With my heart racing, I went downstairs, turned on the first light switch I found, and the room lit up as expected. Deep down, I still thought it might be someone outside, so I turned on the lights in the front and looked out the windows. There was no one. The confusion only grew. I turned off the lights in the living room and went back to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. I was wide awake now, so I turned on the TV again, trying to distract myself. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard loud knocking on the bedroom door coming from downstairs. The sound was aggressive, as if someone was trying to scare me. If I had any doubts before, now it was clear. Someone was inside the house. I left the TV on and stood completely still, fear paralyzing me. The most terrifying thing was that whoever was downstairs could easily open the door, since there was no lock. I remained silent for minutes until, when I felt a little calmer to move, I started looking for my phone. And of course it was not on the nightstand. I couldn't find it anywhere. Maybe I had left it downstairs. The cabin was 2 stories with a small kitchen, a reasonable-sized living room, and a bedroom that was on the upper floor, accessed by a narrow staircase. In addition, there was one of those hatch-like doors that you had to open to access the bedroom. I had been living there for a month and had even paid the second month's rent, which gave me the feeling of being well settled. The cabin was at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by other small houses of the same style. One of them was unoccupied. I never saw a car parked there or any lights on. The other houses were occupied, but I never had contact with any of the neighbors. I work 12-hour shifts, and when I get home, I'm so exhausted that I can barely do anything else, just throw myself in bed and watch TV until I fall asleep. One of those nights, I came home, made myself a bagel with peanut butter and jelly, and drank a protein shake for dinner. Then I went straight to bed. I always made sure to close the downstairs door every night, because I felt uncomfortable having the entrance to my room open while I slept. It felt like I was exposed or vulnerable, even without a lock on the door. The cabin was the perfect size for one person or a couple. I was lying in bed watching TV when suddenly I heard a voice coming from downstairs. "Who's there?" For a moment, my heart stopped and I sat up quickly. The voice seemed to be coming from inside the house, but it could also have been outside. I turned off the TV and crawled over to the round window above my bed, trying to see what was going on outside. It was pitch black and I couldn't see anyone. I then decided to ask, "Who's there?" and the silence that followed was even more terrifying. I got out of bed, went to the door handle, opened it and looked towards the stairs. I even called out for my father, thinking he might have appeared, but I got no answer. With fear paralyzing me, I went downstairs, turned on the first light switch I found, and the room lit up as I expected. In the back of my mind, I still thought it might be someone outside. I turned on the lights in the front and looked out the windows, but there was no one there. The confusion only grew. I turned off the lights in the living room and went back up to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. Upstairs, still dazed, I turned on the TV again, trying to regain normality. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard loud knocking on the bedroom door coming from downstairs. The sound was aggressive, almost as if someone wanted to scare me on purpose. If there was any doubt left, it was now clear. Someone was in the house. I left the TV on and stood completely still, fear paralyzing me. The most terrifying thing was that whoever was downstairs could easily open the door since it didn't have a lock. I sat in silence for about 10 minutes, and when I finally felt a little safer to move, I started looking for my phone. And sure enough, it wasn't on the nightstand. I couldn't find it anywhere. Maybe I had left it downstairs. I opened the bedroom door and looked down the stairs, the light from the TV flickering as it changed. I could see a bit of the stairs into the living room. I walked down in silence, and when I got downstairs, instead of turning on any lights, I ran barefoot to the back door and crossed the yard to the nearest neighbor's house, where I knew there would be people. I saw the lights on and knocked on the door several times. It was then that I noticed someone in the window next to the door watching me. I had no idea how long he had been there watching me. I yelled through the window, explaining what was happening, saying it was the neighbor and that I needed a phone to call the police. He definitely heard me, but he did nothing but stare at me. It was a disturbing scene, and I started to back away from the door when I realized he wasn't responding, just watching me in a creepy way. I looked around and noticed that there were no other houses with lights on. A fleeting thought crossed my mind. What if this man was somehow involved in this? I returned to the cabin through the back door, which was closed as I had left it. I went inside, locked the door, and turned on all the lights in the house. I looked for the intruder and also for my phone downstairs. I finally found the phone in my car when I remembered to check there. I had been so tired earlier that I had left it in the center console. I went back inside with the TV still on in the bedroom. I walked up the stairs, and when I got to the top, I saw someone sitting on my bed staring at the TV. It was a man. I yelled, and he slowly turned his head to look at me. Before I could do anything, I ran downstairs and out of the house, phone in hand. I called 911 and locked myself in my car, watching the house as I spoke to the operator. That's when I saw someone walking through the yard, heading toward the woods. I reported this to the operator. When the police car arrived, one of the officers searched the house, including the upstairs bedroom. After I told him about the man heading toward the woods, the officer asked me if I had anywhere else to stay that night. Swallowing my pride, I decided to return to my father's house, taking a few essentials with me. The next day, I returned to the cabin and spent another night there before picking up the rest of my things. To my surprise, the owner agreed to give me some of the money back. He asked me about the man's appearance, but after that, he didn't ask any more questions, which I found suspicious. Something didn't seem right about the whole situation, from the strange neighbor who ignored me to the owner's haste in moving out, not to mention the presence of someone breaking into the house. Maybe it was all connected, or maybe I was just being too theoretical. My wife, Anna, and I are ordinary people, living an ordinary life in a quiet neighborhood with ordinary neighbors. We follow the pattern of routine our parents taught us. Work, home, and always the same thing. Now, I'm not a first-rate writer, so this story is clearly different. The last time I dedicated myself this much to writing was on my last college paper. But something happened recently that still haunts us and no one can explain. It was a typical day for Anna and me. We finished work and decided to go out for dinner. We're not the type to stay up late during the week, so by 9 p.m., we were already brushing our teeth and ready for bed. By 10 p.m., we were in bed and, as usual, turned out the lights. At 11 p.m., we sometimes read a book or watch a show, and that night we were pretty much glued to the TV. That's when the phone rang. Anna told me not to answer it, since any call at that hour usually doesn't bring good news. I agreed with her, but on the other hand, I thought it might be something urgent and decided I should answer it. I reached for the phone next to the bed, but before I could pick it up, it stopped ringing. That landline was a nightmare. When the call ended, the caller ID disappeared and there was no way to check the call history. I thought it was just a mistake, but a few minutes later, the phone rang again. I picked up the receiver and saw that it was an unknown number. Anna and I were surprised, especially since it was after 10 p.m. I always thought there was some kind of time limit for calls, and for me that limit has always been 10 p.m. I didn't answer, but shortly after, the phone rang again. At that point, something inside me felt like it was an emergency. Something terrible might be happening to a relative, so I answered it quickly. On the other end of the line, it was the voice of our neighbor, Noah, asking if I knew the man who was standing in front of my house. I was confused and asked, "What are you talking about?" He asked me to go outside and then abruptly hung up. I found this extremely odd. When I told Anna what Noah had said, she became visibly startled and said, "Don't go outside." I told her I was just going to look out the window. I went downstairs, pulled back the curtains a little, and looked out into the front yard. There was definitely no one outside. I opened the front door and the storm door and walked up to the driveway. I looked around, including the bushes in front of the house, but it was empty. I was starting to get irritated at the idea that Noah could be pulling a prank on us so late on a work night. I also found it odd because it wasn't like him to pull that kind of prank. I went back to bed and told Anna that there was no one outside and that Noah was probably trying to trick us. She was just as confused as I was. It all seemed bizarre. She suggested I call him, so I did. However, the phone rang, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message saying, "Hey Noah, what was that call about? Call me back." Then the phone rang again. It was an unknown number again. I answered it, and it was Noah again saying, "Before I can say anything, get out. There's someone standing in front of your house." He spoke calmly and slowly, then hung up. I stood up quickly and said loudly, "What the hell is going on?" I told Anna to wait upstairs and went downstairs once more. I looked through the curtains and this time I saw someone standing at the end of our driveway where it met the sidewalk. The person was wearing a hood covering their face, and the darkness around them seemed almost total. I was really scared. I opened the door and said, "Can I help you?" The person just stood there saying nothing. I threatened to call the police and then the phone rang again. I quickly closed the front door and went to the phone in the kitchen. This time, I noticed that the caller ID showed the number of my neighbor, Noah. I answered it and Noah said in a much more normal voice, "Hi, I just got your message. What was it about?" "I didn't call you." I was completely confused. I swore to him that he had called me twice, talking about a man in front of my house. He seemed even more confused than I was. Then, moments later, Noah said that he didn't see anyone in front of my house. I went to the window again, and this time, the man who was there had already disappeared. I was furious and demanded that Noah tell me immediately if this was a prank, and if it was, we were in big trouble. Noah swore that he was telling the truth and that he was definitely not the type of person to pull a prank like that. He had always been a very discreet and respectful person. To make sure that Anna didn't think I was going crazy, I put Noah on speakerphone so that she could also confirm that we had indeed received 2 calls from someone who sounded exactly like him. Noah did the same and put his wife on the phone to confirm that he was also telling the truth. In the end, what else could he say except that it sounded like someone was playing a prank on us? Eventually, we hung up the phone and tried to get on with our evening. But something was still nagging at me, bothering me. It was such a bizarre situation, something I couldn't understand.